So I offered to talk a bit about Ghost Unchained, and not because this game is so special in itself, but because it is the first large-scale game in which they apply non-fungible tokens. And non-fungible tokens are tokens that run on Ethereum, and each of them represent a unique asset inside of the game. So they are different from ordinary tokens. The ordinary tokens are ERC20 standard, which are all interchangeable, similar to dollars or bitcoins. But a non-fungible token is just a unique item, and you can move it around on the Ethereum just like a train moves on a track, but it's a unique thing that represents a unique in-game item. And the game client, the software in the game, talks to the Ethereum blockchain and sees like, oh, you have these items, and then you can control those in the game. And you can transfer them to another address, so to another person, so they become tradable items. And that's the cool thing about non-fungible tokens. And the first example of this was the CryptoKitties. Have anybody ever played with CryptoKitties? Yes, you have. You're familiar with it?
Oh, yeah.
Everybody else knows what CryptoKitties are, right? So you have these collectible cats. They are cartoon cats, and they are a unique cat that sits on the Ethereum blockchain. And if you have a MetaMask wallet in your browser, then you can interact with your cats. And the cool thing is that you can breed them, and then you get a new cat that has the genetic traits from the parents' cats, and then you can go sell them, or you can rent them out to breed with other people's cats. And then the trick is to find out, to mix and match interesting traits that make your cat rare and valuable, so you can sell it for more ether. And there were ridiculous prices paid for cats. The most expensive cat went for $100,000 or more. So I bought a few cats for $80, and then I sold a few as well for like $5 or $20, and in the end I ran a small loss, but while it was really popular, it was like an interesting thing to see how this worked. But just breeding cats is not very interesting from like modern game point of view. So that's why this is a game that's much more interesting. It's based on Magic the Gathering, which is a card trading game, and it already has a long history in the gaming world, but it's physical cards. So you have cards, and you make a deck, and you have to beat your opponent, just sort of like chess except with cards. And you can see them here. And then the trick is to get rare and powerful cards in your deck, but those cost money. In Magic the Gathering there were physical cards, and you had to be lucky to have a deck that had a rare card. But now you can put those cards on a blockchain as a non-fungible token, and then buy and sell these cards, and make yourself a more powerful player that way if you can afford them. And you can combine cards to make more valuable cards as well, in the same way that you can create new cats by breeding them in the case of CryptoKitties. So that is what the games have in common. There's like 10 other games that have a similar concept, that you have a tokenized in-game asset, but I will not go into the details of those. I will use this as the most interesting example because technically they have done some cool things. This is a marketplace. You see this guy is one of the game designers. He explained it here, and you can see the prices. These are relatively cheap cards, but you can filter them on type and what kind of god they are for and what kind of deck they are good for, and then you pay and you can just improve your deck that way. So there's this interesting fact about Vitalik Buterin, who created Ethereum, that supposedly one of the reasons he wanted Ethereum to exist is that he used to be like this very serious player of World of Warcraft. So this massive multiplayer online game, and he was obsessed with it, and he had an extremely powerful character. And then there was an update. Blizzard, the production company, did an update of the whole game, and his character was much less powerful as a consequence of that update, and it might even have been deliberate You know, that they say like this combination of traits is not really balanced or fair, so they just decided that his character was not so cool anymore. And apparently he cried himself to sleep, and he stopped playing World of Warcraft, and he realized how bad it is to have centralized control over the powers of these characters. So I can imagine that that must have been one of the inspirations for creating Ethereum, which is indeed suitable for a decentralized ecosystem that is immutable, right? You supposedly cannot just change these rules. Now, in the case of Gods Unchained, when there's a batch of new cards released, there is actually a period of 1 month in which the game designers can change a few attributes of the card still. So it's not set in stone what those cards can do. But after that they are fixed, and of course that will mean that the price will be more stable as the players figure out what this card can do, and they know the company will hopefully not change the attributes, right? So I will, in the discussion we can talk a little bit more about like how immutable that really is then, you know? Like, but there is this in-between thing that they fix it after a month. CryptoKitties proved that you can create these kind of things. And yeah, I talked about the cards are tradable and rare. And what is the cool technical innovation that they did when they launched these cards is that they launched 6 million non-fungible tokens that each represented these unique tradable cards. And they created them in batches. So the network did not get overloaded. They created 6 million tokens in 3 days without the Ethereum network slowing down, because they created multiple cards in one transaction. Whereas in the case of CryptoKitties, you might remember that in that December, the whole Ethereum network went completely locked in lockdown, and everything was full because the issuance of these cats and the trading of these cats all happened at the same time, and it's just the network could not handle that. So they solved that in a clever way by batching these transactions. I don't know what they did in detail. Maybe one of you guys can comment on that. But apparently you didn't have to invent new technology to create a more efficient issuance system. And that was a bit of a surprise for me. So. Now, what is really cool about having a non-fungible token that is immutable on a blockchain is that you can create your own game on top of these tokens. So you can say, well, okay, I have this sword or this god card in this game, but I can create my own game using that asset as an input. So you could basically, anybody who is part of an ecosystem of an existing game, you can import or attract to your game because they will suddenly have certain abilities or assets that can be recycled inside of your new game as well. So this is one example where you can have your cat race other cats, and there's bounty. You know, the winner of a cat, they win real ether. Right? And it depends on the attributes, so the genetic traits of your cat, plus how when they enter in the race. I don't know the details, doesn't matter. But somebody's just like, hey, you know, I can have these cats raced. And then people started breeding cats in the original CryptoKitties based on how fast they could go in this game, because you can win money, right? So this is the kind of thing that really gets me excited. This is also the first thing I immediately realized that this would be possible when I heard about non-fungible tokens. And it's so cool to see how this is an early example of how you can do this. Another way of third-party apps helping the ecosystem is that you can have like software that starts, for example, to rank all the cards that are in the marketplace in a unique way that the original game developers did not work on. So you can just keep adding to the ecosystem, which is really much more interesting than traditional game environments. I have 3 questions that we can sort of discuss, and something that really occurs to me, and I would like to get your guys' opinion on, is that this rebalance period of 1 month, is that a good compromise between having an immutable thing, like really immutable, and a fair game? You know, because the original idea, or it's supposed to be that if you acquire certain attributes, it's impossible to change them. But you still have a game company that sort of decides how to interpret this non-fungible token. So that is still a centralized aspect in the game, right? So they could maybe not say for you specifically this character is too strong, or they could still do something like what happened to Mr. Buterin when he was playing World of Warcraft. It's so if that's the case, then it didn't really solve anything. Then we didn't really add new functionality all that much, right? So what do you think? Like, is this idea of rebalance periods, does this disprove the whole functionality that we were looking for? Does it disprove the immutability?
What exactly is being rebalanced?
Yeah, so they can change the attributes of the cards. If the card is too powerful, and people say like, wow, I can just win every game because there's this loophole that I can use.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And then they don't want that to happen, right? It's supposed to be fun and fair, right? But it's just like with Mr. Buterin's character in World of Warcraft. Like, you could argue that it was probably a very powerful character, but if he created that, it was his character, so he should be able to control it or not, right?
Is this the, like, when you say you can combine different cards to create a new one? That this is like when new cards are generated, right?
Yeah.
So,
but it could very well be that that a new card is generated, and if you combine them in an interesting way, in that card that gets then created by the combination could also be too powerful. Like, and they will find that out too. You know, they have in a 1 month period, they will be able to evaluate the impact of that card on the whole game atmosphere.
although you could do that sort of now with a centralized gaming company, but ultimately, if the rebalancing is done on chain, then they could move from a centralized. You could have like a DAO that does this, and you vote on the DAO. So it's not like.
Yeah, they could make it.
It's like transferable almost.
That's an idea that you say like, okay, it's not up to the gaming company to decide if the card gets changed or not. So, but if everybody agrees and has a number of votes or whatever, then you would have to come up with an economy for that. But that is definitely a possibility. I agree. Yeah. But as it is, it's just the game designers that get to decide. So I feel really weird about it. It's like, okay, we went through all this trouble to create an immutable game ecosystem, and at least you don't have to trust the game designers all that much, but apparently there's still no guarantees. So.
But I think there's still a separation between the game, like as you said, you can have, because you have the assets that are underneath, you can always create another game. So if people aren't happy with the game, they could create, just transfer all the.
Yeah, they could fork. Yeah.
So
that's a good point. Yeah. But of course it would be a massive amount of work. It would be similar to Ethereum and Ethereum Classic, right? You could say, we keep this one, and or we change what we want. It's a possibility. Yeah.
So there is a bigger problem than just like this question of fairness, but the value and powerfulness on the card. Like if you compare like World of Warcraft, that's actually a game where you're gonna farm a lot to level up your character, and at the end, that's kind of unfair that the company decides to just downgrade your character in the game because you work so hard to bring this to this level. But in terms of cards game, it's kind of complicated when cards are always being created again and again and again. For example, that's happened for Hearthstone, the other card games from Blizzard. They had the same issue at the beginning, it was okay, and they created more cards, more powerful together when you match them. that at the end the game was unplayable for like beginners and stuff like that, and you needed to pay a lot of money to get these cards, otherwise you can't play the game. So I think that's why they said like this 30 days period of time when you can adjust the game. But even such days, I don't think it's a solution, because after a few years, you still have kind of like a lot of issues regarding that.
I think they put a limit on how many new cards they're going to issue. Like at some point it's going to stop. I think they will. I don't know exactly what the schedule is, but I think they probably addressed that by saying like we only have 6 million cards, and we issuing them slowly, and after that it's finished, right? That's
there is a limit. I think it's okay, but yeah, still 30 days if you don't know what cards will be created later.
yeah, that you can make dangerous combos. Yeah.
If you cannot just say like after 3 years, okay, let's downgrade these cards because they are way too powerful because they already have been issued 3 years ago and the period is done already. Can be in the situation when their game can't be playable again anymore because of that. So
Yeah, are you in the like maybe you could have the opinion of saying like, oh, okay, it's not playable for beginners, tough luck. It's just for the veterans that already have the cards, and or if you have a lot of money, maybe the game is about money, just like poker. You know, maybe it's part of the game to have money. And oh, I found this really dangerous trick of this card. I have found a loophole. I can sell this card now for way more ether. You know, so that then you get there's this cool phrase that I learned a couple of years ago from a colleague, and he said that blockchain basically means that you have the gamification of finance, but also the other way around, that you have the financialization of games. So they become valuable assets. And so I don't know what's your opinion about it, because you seem to know a bit more about how these cards games works. So
I don't know about games too much because I'm not the person who's like playing. The only games that I'm playing right now is the ones on Gitcoin, and they're called Gitcoin Quest. And basically, you get an article, and then afterwards, you read it, and then afterwards, they ask you a bunch of multiple questions, and if you answer them correctly, then you get like a non-fungible token. And those afterwards, I don't know if you can trade them yet, but I think they have some kind of value. But in that ecosystem, like if you're just like a random user on the street, you really have to sell them the idea that this token is valuable. So the way I think about this is like the spectrum of like who decides what, right? Because like if you have World of Warcraft, like the company can, just one single person, let's say the CEO says, okay, I don't like that guy, let's just take his powerful sword, they update the database, boom, what you worked for years to like build is gone. I think like the main fear is that like if you can have a single individual dictating your fate. Now, the other, like if you scale it back now, there's this concept of like DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, where like let's say like a company is not instead of a single individual or company, now you have like a group of individuals or like a community who decides, okay, what's fair to do in this dilemma or decision making process. And then afterwards you have like things like creation markets, or like these new things like quadratic voting, just to solve this, okay, how do we solve democracy in a way that's not terrible? Which is a very, very hard thing, to solve. And like a lot of people right now, are still like nibbling at these things. I like.
But it seems that the games are a bit easier, So the consensus that seems to emerge from this is that there is ways to get to a more fair thing, but there's no guarantees. It's at least more fair than taking someone's whole character or.
After it's the same, to the example of the character that's happened with Bethesda and Fallout 76, a lot of stories like that Bethesda decided to do whatever they want and just like ban people or whatever for no reason. I think like the only solution for this kind of situation is to allow the community to get consensus with a vote about okay, one card you need to downgrade, which one you need to level up, da, da, da. So it's not the company who should decide on that. Maybe even at the beginning, I'm not 100% sure, but if they allow the community around the game to vote for this kind of situation, there is no problem at all, because the community decides and not the company. So
Yeah.
Except could a DAO or a voting system react quick enough to an issue that comes up that could jeopardize the game?
What do you mean?
I don't know, if they notice that there's a flaw between certain cards and that someone has a major advantage and for some reason quickly can really mess up things for other people, that might really hurt the reputation, and DAO could not vote quick enough to fix it. But I guess that's the problem with decentralized and decentralized.
Yeah, you can always do things quicker. Like maybe then they can change it over for a longer period of time or something. I think that's what they're trying to find out now. We will see. Let's move to the next question. I have two more. So, how can we decentralize the game mechanics too? Right. So you have still this thing that that there is a gaming company who is interpreting these non-fungible tokens to be a certain way, and I guess that is like artistically superior because you get a unified aesthetic for what these tokens mean. Even if I can make a CryptoKitty look whatever I want, at least there is somebody out there who has a vision for what they are, right? But it's interesting, like maybe it's possible to make the games more interesting if you can also scale up or like put other elements of the game in a decentralized way as well. This is a bit open-ended. I haven't seen any examples of this, but what do you guys think?
Bitcoin.
Bitcoin?
Bitcoin's like it's game theory.
Yeah, well, that's game theory in a mathematical sense,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, there was a philosopher, I forgot which philosopher it was, but the word game is very hard to pin down. I think it was Wittgenstein. Yeah, so if you use the word game, you can apply that to a lot of things. You can say like your career is like a game, right? And love is like a game. And but I'm using it in a very narrow sense of like something on a computer that you play for fun, and it's like this fantasy world with a magic circle that you go into, and you have to score, and like that kind of thing. So that's what I'm referring to. I'm not referring to game theory in a mathematical sense.
You can trade Bitcoin as a game as well.
Yeah. If
On
you,
BitMEX.
I think it's personally, in my humble opinion, hodling Bitcoin and trying to get as much of it as I can is a much more interesting game than playing like some card game that seems to be mostly designed for 12-year-old people. You know, that's like, I think that's my opinion, but I'm really interested in the potential of this as an entertainment technology. So
I think for gaming companies, there's always this trade-off between, okay, like really obsessed and like users and like just the users who just playing for fun, you know, just like a few hours. So like you have like these addicts and like these
casual players.
These casual players. Now, some gaming companies, you know, will try to figure out, okay, who are the users we can make the most money with. Sorry. So sometimes it's like, okay, these people just play for free, so we don't care. So we just focus on like the hardcore players while willing to buy a score for like $1,000 or something like that. Sometimes that's how they make money. So sometimes, you know, they're trying to balance ease of play for the beginners and not like getting. So if it's like World of Warcraft, how do you protect these from like getting slaughtered by these, you know, addicts on the game? If they're trying to do something else.
I think when we talk about like NFT games, their revenue streams are just different in general. So for example, like Sandbox or like just like other F1 or something, F1 Drive, there's like other NFT games. They want to have users created content, so you can tokenize your own artwork, but then their revenue stream is from when you trade, let's say, if they're like good, then when you trade on their platform, they take a bit of money. But when you trade with someone else, like OpenSea, they don't take any money. So it's like what you were saying. It just, I think it depends on like how they planned it. So if their revenue comes from like having people trade a lot, then that's something that they probably want to build in, and that's probably a game mechanism that it's relatively easy to have. And sorry, just on the actual question, I think you mentioned you could, so like for one of our hackathons, we built sort of like a lucky draw on top of these NFTs. So it's not, I think like the sort of the proprietary part is just the user facing part. Like what makes it look good or easy to use is the like it's where the game company probably has advantage over, because I mean you could get all that data from the blockchain today for free, so it's not like you need to I'm trying to get to like the mechanism. The proprietary part is sort of like the part where it makes it easy to use, but anyone could really just play without going through that platform by just sending transactions. So I think it's sort of decentralized enough already, as long as point one doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it does occur to me the way you described it, that the trading itself is actually part of the game mechanics too.
Yeah.
So you can become like an investor. You can say, I'm going to play this game because I want to make as much money as possible. I'm going to see if I can combine cards in the most financially advantageous way, right? And I'm just killing a bunch of people to show how valuable my card is, right? Like things like that. Or you could say like, oh, I really want to be taken away by the story of these gods and all these characters, and I just want to be in this fantasy world, and I don't care about how much ether I have to pay to continue playing. Like that's already a good example. But yeah, I was just trying to explore like ways how can we do this more. And I can totally see how there's this universe of possibilities by combining different blockchain non-fungible tokens in new games. And it's kind of like, oh, you got this sword here in this game. Well, it didn't come to an hour game. It becomes a gun.
Okay.
Oh, this is it.